Hey guys, I'm Georgia and welcome back for another books video. This one unlike anything I've ever done before. I asked in my last books I read recently video if you'd like to see what I've considered to be my top books of 2021 and a lot of you said yes, so here we go. This was actually really hard to narrow down as I've read some fantastic books in the past year like Book Talk and BookTube, and a very well refined to read list have really come through for me. Most of which I have actually read in the past couple of months so please do excuse there's some repeat reviews on here from my book video from earlier in December. But I was actually really surprised when I was going through my list of what I've read this year and found that it wasn't all just the 5-star reads that I wanted to recommend back to you guys again. So this is really just a list of the books that have stuck out in my head the most, the books I tell my friends I absolutely have to read as soon as possible. And you guys are basically like my internet friends, so here we go. Also, before we get into it, please comment down below your top 3 reads of the year. I love hearing what other people are loving to read. So we're going to start strong with 13 by Steve Kavanagh, which was actually my first read of 2021 and still a story I think about all the time. I think I said at the time when I read it that I was desperate to read more of Steve Kavanagh's books, but alas, I have not. So many books to read, so little time. Someone in the comments of my last video suggested that I actually read the blurbs of each book before I delve into giving my opinions on them, so I'm going to try that in this video. And they're probably right, it probably is the best way to sell you on a book. So this one reads, I've got my laptop right here. The serial killer isn't on trial, he's on the jury. They were Hollywood's hottest power couple, they had the world at their feet. Now one of them is dead and Hollywood star Robert Solomon is charged with the brutal murder of his beautiful wife. This is the celebrity murder trial of the century and the defence want one man on their team, con artist turned lawyer Eddie Flynn. All the evidence points to Robert's guilt, but as the trial begins, a series of sinister incidents in the courtroom start to raise doubts in Eddie's mind. What if there's more than one actor in the courtroom? What if the killer isn't on trial? What if the killer is on the jury? Now this is actually the 4th book in the Eddie Flynn series, but please do not let that put you off reading it. I hadn't read any of the other books in this series and I didn't even realise. You really don't feel like you're missing out on any context by delving in right in with the 4th book. And it works really, really well as a standalone. This is unlike anything I've ever read before. It's probably one of the best thrillers I've ever read and ever will read. It's just so cleverly written and it's partially from the point of view of Eddie Flynn, this con artist turned lawyer, and partially from the point of view of the serial killer called Joshua Kane. Joshua Kane is a killer with a very unique ability and you do have to suspend your belief a little bit. It's not completely unbelievable, but like this wouldn't really happen in real life. But he ends up being able to get himself onto the jury for the trial of a crime that he committed himself. A huge amount of this story takes place in this courtroom or like in the process of the trial starting, and usually like courtroom drama doesn't appeal to me, but I was thoroughly hooked on this one. I couldn't put it down. It's so cleverly written and Kavanagh just keeps you turning those pages. It's a totally original crime thriller and I don't want to say too much about the story because you need to read it for yourself, but I highly recommend this. This is actually the only book of this genre I'm recommending in this video, so you know it's a good one. I actually debated whether or not I wanted to talk about My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell in this video because it's not the kind of book that I think anyone will dub their favourite book. Like the topic of this book is dark, as the name would suggest. But there's no denying that it was an absolutely incredible read and one I absolutely have not forgotten about. I think about this story all the time. Vanessa Y was 15 years old when she first had sex with her English teacher. Now the teacher, Jacob Strain, has been accused of sexual abuse by another former student and a journalist has asked Vanessa to contribute to a story about him. But no one seems to understand that what Vanessa and Strain had together wasn't abuse. It was love, wasn't it? As you can guess from the blurb, this is a story of a teenage girl, Vanessa, who was abused by her very adult teacher, but she never recognised it as abuse, even into her adult years, into her 30s. Mr. Strain still has a hold over her and she's been in love with him since she was 15. Vanessa's never been able to have any other romantic relationships. She struggles in life in general, but she just doesn't see it. She doesn't see the link until slowly she does. This is hard to read. It is not for the faint-hearted, but it's powerful and beautifully written, and I think it's a really important read. I think a lot of people, me included, look at situations like the one that Vanessa found herself cornered into and wonder how that can happen. Like, how can't you see what's really going on? But this book completely changed my perspective. Predators like Mr. Strain really do exist in real life, and the worst thing is that these people are charming, charismatic, the life of the party. That's how they're able to manipulate and abuse. The story here moves back and forth between Vanessa's past and present. You see exactly how Strain was able to seduce her and manipulate her, and then you flip back to present day Vanessa, who's still considering him a great man, and you just want to like reach through the book and shake her. Again, really cleverly written, so dark, so powerful. If you feel like you're up for a book like this, I really can't recommend it enough, but it's rough. I'm still not over this next book. I don't think I'll ever be over this next book, and that is Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. I read this on my Kindle and I loved it so much. I really want to get my hands on like a physical version so I can hold it. So maybe I'll do that in the New Year's sales. But there's just some books that you just need to have, you know? I need to have this book. The blurb of this one reads, or at least the Goodreads blurb, reads, First son, Alex Claremont Diaz, is the closest thing to a prince this side of the Atlantic. With his intrepid sister and the Veep's genius granddaughter, they're the White House trio, a beautiful millennial marketing strategy for his mother, President Ellen Claremont. International socialite duties do have downsides, namely when photos of a confrontation with his longtime nemesis Prince Henry at a royal wedding leak to the tabloids and threaten American-British relations. The plan for damage control, staging a fake friendship between the first son and the prince. As President Claremont kicks off her re-election bid, Alex finds himself hurtling into a secret relationship with Henry that could derail the campaign and upend two nations. What is worth sacrifice? How do you do all the good you can do? And most importantly, how will history remember you? Sorry, that's a long ass summary there. But basically this is the first son of the USA falls in love with a British prince. Like, why did I not think of this storyline first? It is absolute genius. I'm furious with myself. It's so obvious, so smart. The best way for me to describe this book is just by saying it's so cute, it physically hurts my heart. It's charming and funny, and don't get me wrong, it very much does have its heartbreaking moments where like everything is thrown into question, but it's mostly just lovely. Like, the thing I think I love most about the story is that it's a queer love story, but it doesn't really have the whole traumatic coming out, disowned, hated by everyone who once loved you thing, which I think is so prevalent in queer media. Like, don't get me wrong, I think it's important to share those stories, but most queer people just want to see happy queer people, real love stories, and Red, White and Royal Blue is that. So you have Alex, who is ultimately accepted by his liberal family, and then Henry, who is struggling with his sexuality, like being accepted within the royal family, but that's to be expected within his status in the royal family, like, you know they're going to be funny about that. But generally, this feels like your typical romantic comedy, falling in love story. It even has the enemies to lovers trope, but like, it's gay, or should I say it's bisexual. And I love that. It's written for queer people, like not just about them. I am a hopeless romantic and I just love this story. I beg everyone reads it. The characters are wonderful, the story feels so real, even though it's so far out of the spectrum of what most people ever experience. The emotions are raw, the love is real, and it's so beautifully written. I still can't believe this was Casey McQuiston's debut novel. Like, debut. Such a strong start. I actually recently bought One Last Stop as well by her, which I also can't wait to read. Another queer book, we have Honey Girl by Morgan Rogers. A lot of these books are going to be queer, not even sorry about it. I have a type, what can I say? I'm not going to read this blurb because it's so long, it'll take me like an hour. But basically this is the story of Grace Porter, who's just got her PhD, she's been working towards it for years, she's now in her late 20s and is kind of having a bit of what can only be described as a midlife crisis. She ends up going to Vegas with her friends to blow off some steam, meets a girl, drunk, marries her, and then they end up going back home to their separate ends of the country, and Grace is sort of left with, I'm married now, what do I do? So she flies to New York to meet her wife, and from there she sort of really starts to question what on earth is she doing with her life. Grace Porter has lived this perfect type A life her entire life, but now she's in her late 20s and she's realised that she hasn't even been living for her, she's been living to please everyone else. Her entire life's aim was to get this PhD and now she's at a dead end. I think I said this in my original review, but I just love that Honey Girl is about a woman in her late 20s feeling lost, because I'm also in my late 20s and feeling a bit lost, and it's such a niche to fit right into. Like, I don't think there's anyone in the late 20s who knows what they're doing, even though the media will try and tell you otherwise. So many books, especially in the kind of genres that I'm into, are about teenagers or figuring out life in your early 20s and college, and as much as I hate to admit it, I'm 27. You don't suddenly have life all sorted out by the time you're 21. You have quite a few years of just feeling like you're drowning. I don't think anyone ever really figures out life, no matter what the media likes to portray. But anyway, Grace is so complex. She has all the flaws and complications that anyone else has, and Morgan Rogers has a really beautiful way of getting that across without ever making her character like unlikable or annoying. I think I went into this expecting a fluffy WLW romance, but it is so much more than that. Yes, it is a WLW romance, and the whole point of the book is that Grace gets drunk and marries a woman that she just met in Vegas, but that to me seems like a secondary plot in this book. Like, Grace comes first, her romantic life comes second, and that's the way it should be, right? Oh, and there's no like big agonising trauma over coming out in this book, no big trauma over her sexuality. She just is a lesbian and that's the way it is. The fact that it was like a woman that she married isn't the point of this book. She's just Grace figuring out life, and I loved it. When I first spoke about this book, I had quite a few people telling me they didn't like it, and honestly, I can't understand why. I really can't understand why anybody would hate this book. Highly recommend, I loved it. I truly believe that Taylor Jenkins Reid can do no wrong, and her latest book, Malibu Rising, is no exception to that rule. She just has such a way of storytelling that so many people aspire to but just never quite reach. The way she's able to write characters in a way that makes you feel like they're real people. Like, I know that's the aim of every author, but Taylor Jenkins Reid just manages to do what so many people fail to do. Like, I feel like I could pick up the phone and chat with Nina Reaver even though she doesn't exist apart from in these pages. I suppose I need to read the blurb though, don't I? Malibu, August 1983. It's the day of Nina Reaver's annual end of summer party and anticipation is at a fever pitch. Everyone who's anyone wants an invite to catch a glimpse of the famous Reaver siblings. Nina, the talented surfer and supermodel, brothers Jay and Hud, one a championship surfer, the other a renowned photographer, and their adored baby sister Kit. Together, the siblings are a source of fascination in Malibu and the world over, especially as the children of the legendary singer Mick Reaver. By midnight, the party will be completely out of control. By morning, the Reaver mansion will have gone up in flames. But ahead of that first spark in the early hours before dawn, the alcohol will flow, the music will play, and the love and secrets that shape this family will all come bubbling to the surface. As that suggests, this is the story of Nina Reaver and her family, who really are a fascinating bunch of people. The narrative is split between when Nina's parents first met back in the 60s, I think, and then that of the big annual party that Nina throws every year in 1983. As the chapters go on, you sort of learn little snippets about the family and their relationships. Nina's father is Mick Reaver, a famous singer who abandoned the family years ago, and Nina's the oldest daughter of 4 siblings. I think at its core, this is a book about siblings and the love that you have and all of the drama that comes along with it. Like, I'm the oldest of 4 children myself, and I really felt like an affinity with Nina. There's always that certain responsibility that comes with being the oldest child, certainly the oldest girl. You're kind of thrown into this care role that Nina finds herself in, but also Nina thrives off being the caretaker. It's all she's ever known. You look after your siblings, you keep them safe, you prioritise them. So I suppose this is Nina trying to figure out how to put herself first, but then there's also all of her siblings going through their own shit. Reading reviews of this, everyone seems to take something different from this book, but the whole sibling thing is mostly my takeaway. And also, this book is confirmation that Taylor Jenkins Reid's books all take place in the same universe, or like at least this, Daisy Jones and Evelyn Hugo all take part in the same universe. There's a sneaky mention in this book of a character from Evelyn Hugo, and I just about lost my mind. That woman can write one hell of a book, and I love her for it. I cannot wait to see what she comes out with next. And this is where we get into some books I mentioned in my last books video, so if you watched that one a couple of weeks ago, my apologies if things are a little bit samey. But I'm just going to talk from the heart. I didn't think this next one would be a book that I would enjoy or find myself recommending to people, but I really have been, and that's Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. This is a book written entirely in verse, and if you find yourself in a reading slump or just want something super quick to get through to reach that reading challenge before the end of the year, then this really could be your one. This is the story of two half-sisters who live in completely different worlds. So there's Camino in the Dominican Republic and Yara in New York City. They share a father, but they don't know that the other one exists. Camino lives for her father's visits to the Dominican Republic. But this year, on the day when his plane is supposed to land, Camino arrives at the airport to see crowds of crying people. In New York City, Yara is called to the principal's office, where her mother is waiting to tell her that her father, her hero, has died in a plane crash. Separated by distance and Papi's secrets, the two sisters are forced to face a new reality in which their lives are forever altered. Now Camino and Yara are both left to grapple with their grief, their newfound love for one another, and what it will take to keep their dreams alive. This is a story of two sisters dealing with their grief over their father's death, but also with the excitement, upset and confusion of finding out that the other exists. And then there's the extra grief of finding out that they didn't know their father at all. This book handles so many complex themes in a really delicate way, it's heartfelt, and the writing is very lyrical. I thought I'd struggle to read this. I'm not a poetry person, but it's not poetry in the typical sense. It's not the kind of poetry you would study in GCSE English, at least. It's just amazing to me what an intricate story Elizabeth Acevedo is able to share in so few words, because although this book looks very chunky, there's not many words on each page. Like, it's really quick. I've just found myself thinking about this a lot since I finished it, and I really would recommend it. I might actually listen to it again as an audiobook because I bet that would be a really great time. This is Sadie by Courtney Summers. I think everyone is going to be absolutely sick to death of me talking about this because I've mentioned it on like every social media platform of mine more than once now. But I make no apologies, this book was just freaking awesome and I will not stop until everyone's read it. So I'm not going to read the blurb again because it's so long, but this is basically a true crime podcast in book form. Like, there's no other way to describe it other than that. I've never read anything like it, and I wish I could find more books like this because it was just so good. The chapters in this book alternate between the narrative of Wes McCrae, who's investigating the case of Sadie, who disappeared after her younger sister Mattie's death, as part of his podcast called The Girls, and then there's Sadie, who's still alive but always one step ahead on her mission, although neither you or Wes really ever know what Sadie's mission is. Sadie is just hungry for revenge. She wants to avenge her sister's death. Her sister was everything to her. Her sister was her entire world. They had a really rough time growing up, and the only thing that got Sadie through was Mattie, and when she lost Mattie, she sort of lost her reason for living. Something I don't think I mentioned in my last review was that each podcast section in this would sort of end on a cliffhanger, and there were so many different ways that the evidence Wes was uncovering throughout his podcast could be interpreted that you literally never knew what was coming next. Sometimes you could correctly interpret what this new piece of evidence meant, other times you'd think you'd know but you would be so wrong. It's really, really clever how it's done. Like, sometimes the narrative in the podcast chapters would be completely wrong, and then you'd read Sadie's chapter and you'd be able to like piece together why he thinks that and what's actually going on. It's really, really cool. Sadie is the definition of a strong female character. She's been through a lot of shit in her life and she doesn't suffer fools, but it also feels as if she's on some kind of suicide mission. Like, she's lost everything that meant anything to her in life. She doesn't care if she lives or dies. She's lost and she doesn't want to be found. So clever. Please read this. I think The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller is going to be appearing on a lot of people's favourite books of this year. I was actually very curious and had a look at when this was first released, and I was shocked to see it was first published in 2011. Like, I know this has probably got its recent surge of popularity because of Book Talk, but to me it just reads like something much more modern in terms of like a very gay modern love story. It feels really recent whilst also being based in ancient Greece or like around Greek mythology, if that's possible. Like, where was this book hiding 10 years ago whilst I was desperately seeking validation? Like, who was hiding this from me? I was searching everywhere for this and I didn't find it anywhere. Greece in the Age of Heroes. Awkward young Prince Patroclus has been exiled to the court of King Peleus. Despite their differences, Peleus' golden boy Achilles befriends the shamed prince. As they grow into young men, their bond blossoms into something deeper, despite the displeasure of Achilles' mother, the sea goddess Thetis. But when word comes that Helen of Sparta has been kidnapped, Achilles must go to war in distant Troy and fulfill his destiny. Torn between love and fear for his friend, Patroclus goes with him. I'm not gonna lie, had I not heard the rave reviews about this on social media, that blurb would not have pulled me in. This book is so much more than that. At its core, this is a love story. Patroclus, banished from his kingdom, and Achilles, a half-god, half-human, said to be the greatest warrior of all time, and they fall in love, and it's absolutely beautiful. This is a retelling of the Iliad, so if you know that story, you know what's going to happen here, and if you don't, then you are in for a roller coaster of emotions. Like, the emotion, the love just drips off the pages here. It just starts off as a simple romance set over the course of more than a decade, but then the Trojan War starts and Achilles, as the greatest warrior, has to go and fight and win the war. This is a tale of love, like deep, all-consuming, I would die for you kind of love, and ego, the cruelty of men and war, and what that does to love. No words, I say, is going to do Madeline Miller's beautiful lyrical writing justice. You just have to read it for yourself, but be prepared to have your heart ripped out of your chest, because I can't even think about this without tearing up. Like, it really bothers me. And finally, we have Verity by Colleen Hoover. This is a thriller, not just a mystery thriller, just a straight up thriller that will have your heart in your mouth. It's an absolutely insane story. I literally had to stay up late to finish this book, and honestly, bad idea because it is so creepy. This is a story of Loan, who's a struggling writer on the brink of financial ruin when she gets the job offer of a lifetime to go and finish the really famous book series by her favourite author, Verity Crawford. Verity's basically had an accident, which means she's too injured to finish her book series, and it's got to be finished. So Loan goes to the Crawford's house and sort of has a look through Verity's office, try and figure out how she's going to end this book, to get into Verity's headspace. And while she's in the office, she finds some stuff that she really wishes that she hadn't. She finds an autobiography written by Verity about the truth of how their twin girls had both died. Colleen Hoover writes suspense so well, and the worst thing about this story is it's actually so believable, or at least like it's believable in fiction book terms. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if something like this really did happen in real life, considering what I do on the internet. If you liked Gone Girl, you will like this book. It's very, very similar vibes, very disturbing in a very particular way that's hard to put into words. This is just a complete mindfuck of a book, and the ending will have you doubting everything. It's twisted, creepy, brutal, disturbing, all the words. If you have an active imagination, you will find yourself struggling to sleep after this one, but it's not completely scary. Like, it's not going to ruin your life, but definitely creepy. I don't want to say anything more because you need to go into this one completely spoiler free to really like get it. But the one thing I will say is if you're particularly sensitive, it could be worth looking at content warnings for this one because it has a storyline that I think some people would really struggle with, but definitely worth a read. So there you go, my favourite books of 2021, the ones that I will be recommending to all of my friends and to you guys. I had a very successful reading year and I'm excited to see what worlds I can discover in 2022 with my challenge of 35 books. I think that's a good goal to aim for. I decided on 35. Like, people who do 100 books a year, how do you do that? Like, I consider myself a pretty avid reader, but 35 might be a squeeze for me. How? You're amazing. Thank you so much for tuning in to not only this video but to all of my book videos over the year. I love making them and I love hearing what books you've been loving in the comments. So again, don't forget to let me know your top 3 of 2021 down below. I am going to start making book top videos next year once I'm in my new house and have some like nice bookshelves and all of my books out of storage, so I can't wait for that. I hope you have a really great new year and I'll see you soon. Bye guys.